Hey, welcome to part 4 in our segment related to um, Roman art. We've been looking at the Roman Empire. We just finished talking about the Flavian Amphitheater. After Vespasian, there were some other emperors that came into power. Domitian was one ruler, and he was assassinated in 96 CE. And then a series of emperors followed him that really helped stabilize the empire and expand the city's urban architectural development. So what you're looking at is a model of what Rome would have looked like, and you can see it was very metropolitan and very urban, and the buildings are crammed next to each other. These emperors that we're going to look at included Trajan, Hadrian, Marcus Aurelius, Antonius Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. Um, One of the things that these emperors did that was innovative and really helped with sort of the expansion of these architectural projects was that instead of hoping for the best and handing down the Roman Empire to a bloodline heir, a new system of appointing an able, intelligent administrator to succeed was adopted. So instead of these emperors just handing the entire empire down to their son or whoever, they thought, and there's a lot of inbreeding, and some of these heirs might not have been up to the task. They decided to sort of break away from that system, and leave the empire to someone more capable. Um, and it worked. It became a problem though because Marcus Aurelius broke away from that system and decided to leave the empire to his son um, Commodus, and he ended up not being a very good leader and managed to destroy the stable government that had been built over several ruling emperors in only 12 years. But we're going to take a look at some of the work from these different emperors. A lot of these are very famous architectural sites. The Romans believed their rule extended to the ends of the Western world, but the city of Rome remained the nerve center of the empire. During his long peaceful reign, Augustus had paved the city's old Republican Forum and restored temples and basilicas as well as building an imperial forum. These projects marked the beginning of a continuing effort to transform the capital into a magnificent monument of imperial rule. Many grand structures, such as the imperial forums that we've looked at, we looked at the Colosseum. We're going to look at the Colosseum we just looked at, the Circus Maximus, that was a track or chariot, a race track for chariot races. We're not going to look at that. The Pantheon and aqueducts stood among um, stood among temples, bathhouses, warehouses, and homes in the center as an expression of successive emperors, um, um, their benevolence and their desire to leave a mark and preserve their memory in the capital. So this was sort of their legacy that they were leaving behind. So one of the things that we're going to look at is the Forum. For century of Trajan, there is more than one forum built by different rulers. For centuries, the Roman Forum, which is called the Forum Romanum, was the civic, judicial, and social heart of the ancient city of Rome, a place where civic buildings, sacred buildings, and monuments were to be both found and admired. Beginning in the 1st century BCE, a new series of public spaces, also dubbed as fora, fora being the plural form of the Latin noun forum, began to be created. These fora, called the imperial fora, since they were built by Roman emperors during the Roman imperial period, would eventually number in 5 in all, and were important public spaces that relied upon the visual potential of monumental art and architecture to reinforce ideological messages. So this is a view of the Forum of Trajan that we're looking at. We're going to be looking at some specific monuments and structures. in that forum. So the imperial fora are located in an area bounded on the southwest of the Capitoline Hill on the northeast of the Quirinal Hill and extended towards the Esquiline Hill. Remember, Rome is, has these 7 major hills associated with it. The fora was initially built between 54, and this is all the different um, forums, was built between 54 BCE and 113 CE with continuous additions, restorations, and modifications through late antiquity. In the Middle Ages, the fora were spaces reused for building. The fora were spaces reused for building materials, housing, industry, and burials. Gradually, these spaces faded from view, buried beneath the medieval and modern city of Rome. A massive campaign of excavation in the 20th century on the orders of the fascist director Benito Mussolini returned large areas of the fora to view. Ongoing archaeological investigation continues to reveal additional elements of the fora and to provide additional data that allows for their contextualization. So the Forum of Trajan is what we're really concerned about. This is the final imperial forum. It was both the largest and most lavish of all the foras. It was inaugurated in 112 CE. The architectural complex relied upon imposing architectural and sculptural features to glorify the accomplishments and principate of the Emperor Trajan. The elaborate forum complex had a vast footprint measuring 200 by 120 meters. The open square of the forum is flanked by porticos that contained exedra, and point viewer attention toward the main structure, the massive Basilica Upa. So this is what they're talking about, this basilica. The architect Apollodorus of Damascus was responsible for the innovative design. On the western side of the basilica was another courtyard flanked by 2 libraries, one Greek and one Latin, that contained a monumental honorific column known today as the Column of Trajan. So we're going to be looking in particular at the Basilica Upa and the Column of Trajan, as well as the markets of Trajan. So this is a bust of Trajan. Marcus Ulpius Tranius, now commonly referred to as Trajan, reigned as Rome's emperor from 98 until 117 CE. He was a military man. Trajan was born of mixed stock, part Italic, part Hispanic, into the gens Upa. This is the Ulpian family in the Roman province of Hispania Baetica, or what we think of as modern Spain, and enjoyed a career that catapulted him to the heights of popularity, earning him an enduring reputation as a good emperor. Trajan was the first in a line of adopted emperors that concluded with Marcus Aurelius. These emperors were chosen for the job based not on bloodlines, but on their sustainability for rule. Most of them were raised with the role in mind from their youth. This period is often regarded as the height of the Roman Empire's prosperity and stability. The ancient Romans were so fond of Trajan that they officially bestowed upon him the epitaphical title Optimus Princeps, or the best first citizen, is what that translates into. It is safe to say that the Romans felt Trajan was well worth celebrating, and celebrate him they did. A massive architectural complex referred to as the Forum of Trajan was devoted to Trajan's career, in particular his great military success in his wars against the Dacians, which we think of as Romania, as modern day Romania today. So this is a view of the Forum of Trajan. Um, Again, this was the final and the largest of Rome's complex so-called imperial fora, dubbed by at least one ancient writer as a construction of a construction unique under the heavens. So the Forum of Trajan is elegant. It is rifled with signs of top-level architecture and decoration. All of the structures, save for the two libraries, which were built out of brick, were built of stone. This is a great deal There's a great deal of exotic imported marble and many statues, including gilded examples. The Forum was composed of a main square measuring about 200 by 120 meters that was flanked by porticos. A portico is an extended roofed colonnade, so that's an architectural term that I need you to know, as well as by exedra. This is spelled Exedrae, and this is an architectural feature. It's a semicircular recessed space on the eastern and western sides of the plan. The main structure at the center of the Forum complex is the massive Basilica Upa, and beside that stood two libraries flanked by the Column of Trajan. So this is the exedra that they were referring to earlier. So we're going to look at the Basilica Upa. Um, this is the main structure at the center of the Forum complex, and it stood again beside two libraries, flanked by the Column of Trajan. Um, as an architectural type, the basilica is uniquely Roman and served various civic and judiciary purposes. Now, you are probably familiar with the term basilica because it becomes an important church form of church architecture. What you probably don't know is that the Christians actually took the basilica form from the Romans and sort of altered it for their churches. So um, initially, the basilica was used as a civic building. The habit of planners from the first century BCE onwards had been to prefer to use the basilica as a framing device so as to have it communicate with the flanks of a Forum square. We see this in many cases, although with some variations. In the case of the Forum of Trajan, the massive and monumental Basilica Upa is constructed at the northern edge of the open courtyard. It thus serves to bisect the complex, with the portico-lined courtyard lying to the east and the libraries and the Column of Trajan to the west. So I'm sorry, I should have been looking at that floor plan when I was talking about it. So a basilica was a large rectangular space building that was adaptable for a variety of administrative government functions. The Basilica Upa was used as a court of law. Other basilica structures were used as audience halls, schools, etc. The Basilica Upa was about 380 feet tall and 182 feet wide. It contained a large central area known as the nave. Okay, so these are terms that should be familiar to you because you probably are familiar with them because of church architecture. That was flanked by a double colonnade of aisles, which you see here, that were surmounted by open galleries. So there would have been a gallery above on the second level, or clerestory, which was again on the second level and would have been a row of windows to let in light and air. The roof was a timber truss roof and had a spandrel of about 80 feet. The structure also included two apses. These are these sort of semicircular protrusions coming from the square. These are rounded extensions at the end of each building. The apse provided imposing an imposing setting for a judge, um, say when court was in session. You know the apse as where the altar is in a church. And eventually a basilica church plan would lose one of the apses. It would just have one apse, and that would be the sort of center focal point. So again, the floor plan should seem familiar to you because early Christian churches would adopt this design. And that's why it's important for you to know the names of these architectural features, because when we get into church architecture, you think learning the architectural features of the temple was difficult. I mean, oh my goodness, when we look at Gothic churches in particular, I mean, it's crazy. And so the better off, the more comfortable you are with these terms, the better off you'll be. This is a reconstruction drawing of what it would have looked like on the inside. Again, the architect was Apollodorus of Damascus. Some historians think that the building may have had a clearer story of windows. This is what this is right here, instead of a gallery that is shown in the reconstruction drawing. The column, oh, I'm sorry, this is a gallery because there are not any windows. Anyway, you get the idea. It would have been a gallery or a clearer story. Um, and then, you can see this is the column of Trajan that we're going to be, this is one of the libraries, and then this is the column of Trajan. So it would have been visible from inside the Basilica Lupul. The basilica is massive. Its overall length is 169 meters, and the interior nave is 25 meters wide. It is apsidial, meaning that there was an apse at both ends with a raised central floor, and the main hall had double surrounded columns, 96 in total. So here's the nave. This is where everyone's hanging out. This is where one of the apses would have been. And again, here you have the double colonnade and then this clerestory or gallery on top. Um, and these 96 columns were probably of white or yellow marble and done in the Corinthian order. So you can see those acanthus leaves as the capital. The basilica was also famous in antiquity for its gilded bronze roof tiles. So you can sort of see that here. As commented by one of the Pausians, this was an enemy of the Romans, who remarked that the building was worth seeing not only for its general beauty, but especially for its roof made of bronze. All right. The next venue that we're going to be looking at is the markets of Trajan. So these are all different structures or monuments that are located on the Forum of Trajan. Adjacent to the Forum of Trajan is a separate architectural complex attributed to Trajan that is commonly referred to as the Markets of Trajan. This multi-level commercial complex was built against the flank of the Quirinial hill, which had to be excavated for the purpose of constructing this complex. The complex of the markets takes its planning cue from the eastern hemicycle of the Forum of Trajan. The ruins of the markets today preserve 170 rooms, and the complex covers a space of approximately 110 by 150 meters. Its walls stood to 35 meters above the level of the pavement of the Forum of Trajan. The original extension is hard to ascertain based in part upon the subsequent reuse and construction in the medieval period and later. So what happens with a lot of these buildings is during the medieval period, they're sort of the material is sort of torn down and reused for other purposes. The archaeologist Corrado Ricci cleared the ruins in the 20th century, but the markets themselves have received comparatively less attention than the adjacent forum. So I'm sorry, I think I might have confused you. The markets is separate from the forum. So this was almost like a separate, but it's close to the Forum of Trajan, and it is under the Emperor of Trajan. During the site preparation for Trajan's Forum, part of the commercial district had to be raised and excavated to make up for the loss. So that's why he ordered the construction of a public market. He removed the whole part of a hillside, which is a very difficult task, to make room for the larger, more luxurious markets. The structure had room for over 150 different merchants. The use of the groin vault, which we saw used with, well, sorry, we saw the barrel vault, but the groin vault with the Colosseum made the construction of such a structure possible. So here's another view of it. And this was also designed by Apollodorus of Damascus. The function of the markets were mercantile. Indeed, the markets may have been designed to relocate shops and offices that were displaced by the forum, the building project of Trajan's Forum. The ground floor offices at the forum level were likely occupied by cashiers of the imperial treasury, while upper level rooms may have been leased out or used by imperial offices associated with the grain um, industry or dole. There were several levels, and certain goods like meats and vegetables could be located in separate sections. So we're looking at sort of an interior view. You can see here this grand barrel vault. Um, the use of the groin vault for the main hall allowed for ventilation and lighting of the structure. The great vaulted market hall is an ambitious and brilliant design, just as with the rest of the complex, reflecting the skill of the designer. Architect who executed it. Um, so anyway, here's a sort of reconstruction drawing of what it would have looked like or how, people would have interacted with the space. And you want to think of the market as almost like an ancient mall. That's essentially what it was. Like most Roman buildings, it also was constructed out of concrete and cement, and definitely would not have been, would not have been possible without that innovation, the invention of concrete, as well as the use of the arch, and in particular the groin vault. And here's just another diagram drawing of it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Apollodorus of Damascus, who was the great architect behind the Forum of Trajan, and also the markets of Trajan. And he was a military engineer and architect who was active during the first quarter of the 2nd century CE. He accompanied the Emperor Trajan on his campaign in Dacia, and is famous for building a bridge across the Danube River that was both described by ancient authors and depicted in art. The relief from the Column of Trajan, which we're going to look at in a little bit, depicts the bridge in the background. That was built in 105 CE. Um, so we'll look more about that. Um, so upon return from the Dacian Wars, Apollodorus is thought to have been the architect behind the project that produced the Forum and the Column of Trajan, as well as the adjacent markets. So this is the Column of Trajan. This is nestled between the two libraries behind the Basilica Lupul. It stood 125 feet tall. The column has a spiraling network of relief carvings depicting Trajan's two-war campaign against the Dacians, again modern-day Romanians. This monument is very Roman because it's depicting an actual historical event. So again, this notion of historical specificity. The Column of Trajan, inaugurated in 113 CE, is the main feature of the Forum of Trajan and is, in its own right, a masterwork of Roman art. The column carried a helical frieze. This is sort of a spiraling frieze going around the column. And it was a historical relief that provided a pictorial narrative of the events of Trajan's wars in Dacia. That culminated with the death of the enemy commander Deciblus The column stands about 38 meters tall, and its frieze wraps around the column shaft 23 times. So you want to kind of think of this as a spiraling frieze going around this column, much in the way a frieze would go around the perimeter of a building. Um, and the total length of this frieze is roughly 190 meters. It's carved in bas relief. The exquisite frieze narrates Trajan's campaign, his military campaigns, and its level of detail is very astounding. The column frieze may draw inspiration from earlier Roman triumphal arches. We haven't looked at those. But this was a tradition um, of which was in which emperors or generals were inclined to depict scenes from foreign campaigns, and in doing so glorify the accomplishments of the commander and his soldiers. So this is an example of a triumphal arch. I should have included this earlier. This is the Arch of Titus, which he was the son of Domitian. And basically, a triumphal arch was that it was an arch, and it basically was like a billboard for the ruler or general or military officer whose military campaign was successful. And so usually it would be inscribed with different relief carvings. There's also relief carvings on the inside. You can sort of see here. Just, in this particular one, it's a campaign against Jerusalem. But these different relief carvings sort of depicting the campaign. This top portion would usually have some sort of inscription, and this would be placed usually on a road or the entryway to a city or forum. And so that's why it's known as a triumphal arch, because it was this symbol of victory. And so with let me get back to the PowerPoint. With this column of Trajan, it's the same idea, but in a different form. So instead of an archway with these relief carvings, um, Trajan is taking a column and sort of incorporating these relief narratives to represent his accomplishments as a military leader. Um, so again, the frieze may draw inspiration from earlier Roman triumphal arches, the tradition of which was inclined to depict scenes from foreign campaigns, and in so doing glorify the accomplishments of the commander and his soldiers. Throughout the Forum of Trajan, the theme of military victory and its celebration permeates the monumental decorative programs that you see. So here's a close-up. The entire relief contains about 2,500 figures linked by landscape and architectural depictions. The bottom bandwidth is about 3 feet high and increases as the spiral climbs higher. This was to help with the legibility of being able to actually look at and understand and sort of read the relief carvings. The relief carvings also become more shallow as the scene moves upward to help viewers see better, because this would allow less cast shadows to form with shallow relief carving. The large figure toward the bottom of a half-nude man is a mythological river god, and is supposed to represent the personification of the Danube River where Trajan began his military campaign. So this is very Roman. So we see this inclusion, just like the breastplate of the Augustus of Prima Porta, this infusion of mythological events with actual historical events, and this idea of historical specificity. Um, the scene at the beginning shows the army crossing the Danube River. You can sort of see this repetition of boats right here. And then Trajan is a reoccurring figure throughout the relief narratives. Here's some other views. The column was made out of stacked stone slabs, so it wasn't just one, like a huge shaft or one piece of rock. Um, and these slabs were hollowed out. And you can actually sort of see the seam right here at the bottom of how these slabs were sort of stacked on top of each other. There's also a very tiny staircase inside the column, and you can see these teeny windows so that you can look out, and this would have been for spectators to look out. But like the Romans, I mean, they love depicting animals, so we see animals and really we see a lot of their engineering capabilities. Not only were soldiers, not only could they fight, but they could also build things. They could build trenches and bridges, to cross over. So they're quite, again, excellent engineers and problem solvers. And here's another view. Looks like they're fighting. Looks like they're having some sort of military defense with their shields. This is actually showing the bridge that we discussed earlier, that Apollodorus, the architect of the Trajan markets and the Forum, helped to build. And then we actually see the figure of Trajan sacrificing by the Danube River in the background. The entire relief would span about 625 feet if the band was laid out in a straight line. So if you were to actually sort of take it and unravel it, so to speak, it would have been that long. The monument is important because earlier depictions of battle scenes function to humiliate the enemy. This narrative does not do that. In fact, it treats the enemy with respect. And so, why would a winning side want to do this? And this is something that I want you to think about. Um, and so the reason is that it doesn't say much for a winning army to defeat an unworthy opponent. The relief conveys the Dacians did not have the technology to defeat the Romans. The base of the column depicts relief carvings of Dacian weapons and battle accoutrements. And this in turn celebrates this idea of Rome's ingenuity. So basically, instead of humiliating the enemy, as we saw with Egyptian, relief carvings where they would be naked and their heads cut off and splayed out, as we saw with the Palette of Narmer, there's a bit more respect being paid to the enemy, and the fact that you know that the in order to defeat somebody, you want to defeat a worthy opponent. And so they did consider the Dacians worthy opponents. But they're also showing this idea of how good engineers and their technology was. So it functioned and this column functioned in many different ways. A gold and bronze statue of Trajan once stood at the top of the column. It was replaced in 1558 CE with a statue of St. Peter. So that's what's up there now. Obviously, the bronze statue of Trajan was probably taken down and repurposed, and because it was bronze and used for something else, which is what happened a lot in the medieval time to a lot of these ancient monuments and bronze statues. All right, I'm going to stop here. We're going to look at another emperor in our next segment, Hadrian. We'll look at some more architecture, so stay tuned.